Okay. Hello, everyone. I've recently learned that there's such a thing as universal meeting time. So whatever time a meeting starts, you say good morning. And when you leave, you say good evening. So good morning, everyone, regardless of what time zone you're in. Welcome to the latest episode of Deploy Friday, the Platform.sh show. I'm your host for today, Larry Garfield, Director of Developer Experience. And today we've got a great show for you. We're actually going to be talking about branding and what a brand means for your company and for your product. And to talk about that, we have two of our own experts on the line. Allison Simmons is our Vice President of Product and Design here at Platform. And Savannah Bergeron, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay, is a communications designer. So let's start off. Allison, tell us a bit about you, what you do, what have you done?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am currently the VP of brand and product, but it didn't start that way. I actually joined the company before it was Platform, so all the way back in the Commerce Guys days. Very early on, I joined the company as a front-end engineer at that point, and stuck with it. And over the years, I transitioned different roles. And after front-end design, I really took the role of lead design for both the UI or the product, and also eventually the marketing piece. From there, I was able to start scaling the design team beyond just one person. And we were able to build and bring on Savannah to lead the brand and communication side. And then we also have the product design side. So that's a little bit about where I'm at today.
Great. The classic work your way up the corporate ladder story.
Yeah, indeed.
And Savannah, how about you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Savannah Bergeron, and yeah, I've been with Platform for, almost 2 years now. It doesn't feel like that. As Allison stated, I was brought on to help spearhead a rebrand and kind of help with the communication side of things. My background is a little all over the place, anywhere from bartending to I had a short stint where I hacked my way as a front-end dev as well, very poorly. And from there, I went into focusing more on infographics and data visualization, where I really learned a lot about illustration and kind of client management. And from there, I moved into a consultancy where we did a lot of work with the nonprofit sector, and I was able to learn a lot more about communication and how it's done in person and also in distant environments, and how design is important to that. From there, I came onto Platform, and it's really just been a blast working on our brand and being able to leave that agency setting and actually focus in-house. I had done a lot of work where you're working on a brand and you build a baby and you ship it off, and it's really been nice to just nurture and care for and be able to continue to influence that brand baby. So it's been a really enjoyable time.
Yeah, having done consulting on the technical side for a decade before coming to Platform, I can definitely relate to the, get to iterate on something rather than ship it and move on to the next thing. It's a very different experience. So to start off with, we're talking about brands, product brands. What exactly does that mean? For most people, you say brand, they think, oh, that's the logo for some company. But we're talking about a lot more than just logos here, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly deep. I think for a lot of people, there's a different answer to this question. And, as you said, to some, branding is a logo and it's a set of colors and maybe a couple of rules to follow about where the colors and the logo go. For us, we really wanted to approach things from an emotional perspective. To us, a brand is that emotional connection that our customers have to our product, as well as our internal team. You can't forget that. So we really wanted to build something that helps express that emotional reaction that someone has to our product when they understand it for the first time. So brand is more than just colors. It's really how do we translate and facilitate that conversation in a visual way about all of the things that our product means to different people. And so it can get actually really quite analytical at times. And I think decoration is kind of that last step if you ever even get there when it comes to brand.
Mhm. So
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
would just actually add that it isn't just about creating a brand. So it isn't just about a logo and a color. It actually is about every company has a brand already, whether they've built one on, intentionally or not. It is about how customers and people see your company or your product. Your brand exists. And just kind of like in social media, the perception of what your company is and does and how it interacts with everyone and everything in the world. And it is a little bit about that personal judgment of what that company is and does, and that is your brand. And so you either let everyone just create that for you, or you also work intentionally to build the foundation of what is important to your company and how you do want to be perceived and how that works both visually and with your words and in your product, etc.
So it's really about just being deliberate in these things that are happening already, whether you want them to or not.
Yeah, I personally, yeah.
So leaves so many questions. I guess let's start with, how do you determine what your brand already is? Assuming you're not starting from ground zero and building the brand image before the actual product, which let's not do that.
Yeah.
How do you go about figuring out, okay, what is that sense and emotional feel around your products already, so you know where you're coming from? How do you discover that?
I would say talk to people. That's the best way to get information. Talk to some customers, talk to your internal people. I think an approach that we took when we started the rebrand was we interviewed all of our leadership team, and we had it was very much like UX testing, where you're talking to people and you're running through a script and asking questions and getting answers. And we did that, and it really helped us arrive at where we are. We took that data and that information and we used it to figure out who the company already was, as well as where we wanted that brand to go. So that's one of the things that we did.
But you're going to get different answers when you ask, the C-suite team and customers and the support team. They're going to have different answers to the same question, right?
You would think. I think yes, in a lot of ways. I did find a very unique situation here. There was a lot of alignment and a lot of agreement, and to me, that really reinforced that we do have kind of a special thing going here. I think that I don't want to get too lofty, but it was very unique to me in my career, especially when it came to Exco, talking to people, and that would be our leadership team, and asking them questions and really getting very aligned responses in different words. I've worked in other places in my past where it felt kind of like leadership had their own agendas or their own visions for a company, and they didn't really talk together very frequently. So I don't know if it's our multicultural background of the company or what, but I feel like our product and our people are a little more empowered to be themselves and have opinions and express them. But because of that, I think that it leads to more alignment on important issues. So when I was talking to people and asking these questions, I got a lot of repeats, which was really exciting for me because it made my job a lot easier. And it also, I think, aligned with kind of a lot of the things that the customers think. We have this internal thing, and I mean it's external too, that we talk about, and it's called that aha moment. And we have this really complex, complicated piece of software, and it does all these things, and it's really hard to explain all of the things that it does because one thing that's important to a customer might not be as important to another customer, and they latch on for a different thing. But one thing that's universal in that experience is this aha moment. And it is once they understand our product and what it delivers, it's like this revelation. And there's kind of this statement of why can't everything work like this? And that's really something that we latched onto. And that is a unifying factor that we hear from really anyone that we talk to. And so that really kind of became a base in trying to figure out our brand and how to move it forward.
Yeah, and on the customer side, I mean, it was the same thing when we talked to customers sort of about our product, and it was the incredible power of taking something so complicated as, cloud infrastructure and finally realizing that there was a better way to do it, and that joy and that aha moment that our customers had when they finally put all of the pieces together. And again, as Savannah said, that concept became a core sort of building block when building our brand.
Yeah, that matches my own experience as well, both for me when I started the platform and customers I've talked to. There's that, this is weird. I don't get it. It's complex. What's going on? Oh, wait. Oh, that's what you're doing. Oh, where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm very familiar with that. So what are some of the questions you asked people, either internal or external, to really get out that information, get their sense of what Platform is?
Yeah, I think one of the main things we did is just started with lists, asking people to give me one-word answers of who they thought we were and who they thought we weren't, as well as who they thought we aspired to be. Some of those words were, they felt we always wanted to be, were human, relatable, reliable. It was a really important one. Some of the things that we weren't were, stuffy, salesy, complicated. Those were all things that we didn't want to identify with. So from there, I think some of the other questions we asked were, what is your favorite thing about the current brand? Which I think I got the same response from everyone, which was, we don't have one. Please help. We also asked, what they liked about our events and our event presence, because that was something that was really strong before I came on. And that's really, I think, where a big part of our brand was events and how we handled them. And that was really all Allison and her creativity that she brought to that. She can talk about it better than I can. But the other things we asked about were what customers thought, quotes that we had gotten from there. And we really, that's the bulk of it, as well as, how I asked for everyone to rate us on a scale of 1 to 5 of how corporate we wanted to be versus how whimsical or how playful. And I actually used a scale of, I had Emerald on the corporate side, I had Guy Fieri on the quirky side, and we landed at a 3.4. So that put us as Gordon Ramsay in my very scientific method.
Take it.
But those types of questions are really helpful for the design side as well as leadership, because you have those things on paper to hold people accountable. So I needed that selfishly. So I had data when I went into doing these mood boards and presenting illustration styles and colors. If I got pushback, I was able to, which I never even needed to use this, so it's great, but it's really useful as a tool to measure deliverables against and challenge people's feedback against, hey, you said you wanted to be a 3.4 on this scale. Do we need to adjust the scale, or do we still agree with the things that you said? So those interviews are helpful, not just in the research, but for, really cultivating things and being able to measure things once they're done.
So then this may be an unfair question, since it sounds like you didn't need to do that here, but suppose, you develop this sense of, here's the emotion, here's the adjectives that you want people to associate with the company. But what they're actually associating with it now is totally different. You want to be quirky, but everyone thinks you're super stuffy and corporate, or maybe vice versa. You want to be super stuffy and corporate, but everyone thinks you're too quirky for that. How do you go about squaring that circle then? Is that we have to change all our lettering, or is that we have to culturally retrain all of the employees, or little of each? How does one change the brand if it's out of alignment with what you want?
We've done a bit of that. We kind of did a soft launch with the brand, and we kind of, I think as Allison says, we tried it on for close to a year, and we really did a lot of internal reflection and had some really hard conversations with the visuals we were putting out there. And we did this thing called brand talk every Tuesday, and we would have a laser focus on really specific things like rabbits or shiny or events or rabbits part 2. And we would just really get into the nitty gritty. We would go through Slack feedback that we had gotten from people. We would ask Catherine, our events person, how things were being perceived at events. And we would really measure stuff against that. And we made adjustments. So I think when you approach your brand from a human perspective and you give yourself that grace and know that your brand is a living entity, it's not a one size fits all, and it's not a statue. You need to be able to change it and adjust and kind of go with the flow. And we were able to do that here. And I think that we did get off track and things got a little too, in one direction, and we were able to adjust and bring things to where we felt they were in more alignment. And we're going to always do that. It's never done. It's something we're going to continue to do and mold and morph as time goes on.
So that's how we got from the space to the space bunnies to the robo bunny we've got now. that kind of process.
Exactly.
Okay. So I guess that's the next question then. Once you've got that idea of where you are, where you want to be, what are some concrete steps for like there's obviously the visuals, you can play with the logo, you can play with the graphics in the application or the documentation. What else do you do besides that? Does it affect the product design? Does it affect, like we haven't really talked about brand over in the documentation team, aside from clear, concise, direct, and cover everything. But that's kind of disconnected from the brand conversations you've been having. So what areas would that brand apply to, and how does it apply in different areas?
Yeah, I would say, that's the next step in some ways in our
So
in
you're
our
coming
brand
for us in
journey.
documentation is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
exactly. Indeed. It's impossible to do everything all at once. You have to take an iterative and a dynamic approach and get the foundation piece and then build more and more and more. And that's what we're doing. We created actually this design department that could support design very sort of thoughtfully on the marketing side and on the product side. And just recently, within the last 6 months, we noticed this gap actually, and this digital space that is happening kind of in between design, in between product and in between the pure sort of marketing side. And it's exactly what you said. There are a lot of digital brand properties where the customer is experiencing things, and it wasn't necessarily being intentionally designed, just due to resources and time. And now we actually have someone heading that up. We're doing the work incrementally, one project after another. And yes, absolutely, documentation is a key piece to the brand. It's where people go at the very first sort of interaction with your product. Like, what is this about? Trying to understand it. Brand is not always just about first perception. It's about, hey, I'm frustrated, something's broken, and I need to find an answer. Does your product allow me to have that moment of like, okay, I have an answer, I feel good, or I know where to go for more information, etc. That is just as critical, and that is definitely on our path to continuing to build the brand.
So when you're designing these kind of representations of the emotion you want to have, we're an international company. We have customers on every continent except Antarctica, and I figure that's just a matter of time. How do you deal with cross-cultural issues where, the classic example, red to a European or North American audience is danger, warning, alert. To a Chinese audience, the color red culturally is happiness and warmth and celebration, which is not the same thing at all.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with, the things that trigger a certain emotion are going to be culturally dependent when you're dealing with so many different cultures?
For sure.
So,
Savannah, do you want to take that one first?
I'll start. Yeah,
Okay.
I think the most important thing to do is be empathetic and ask questions. If you're ever concerned about something or you don't know, be upfront about it and be honest and ask people. As an international company with people everywhere, that's a great resource where I can ask people for free. It's great. I can post something in Slack and I can wait for responses. And also just be aware that you're not always going to get it right. Sometimes we're going to mess up and we're going to do something and unintentionally, misrepresented our intentions or has created offense, and just that's going to happen, and you apologize and try to make it right. I think that's really the best thing you can do.
Well, and we do actually have real life experience on this topic, because it is something that comes up, and especially for a brand that we're trying to build, which is differentiating itself. I think that's why you'll see a lot of bigger companies, or kind of err on the side of maybe being a bit bland, because it is sometimes hard to both take a risk and also be sure that everything is universally accepted everywhere. But we are trying to walk that line and that tightrope. And I agree with Savannah. The way to do that is just to be empathetic and always be listening, and always be receptive to different feedback. For example, in our events, we do like to stand out because we want people, it's a crowded space. You want people to at least turn their heads to say, I wonder what this is about. Stop to talk to somebody.
I've been there in the bright, shiny silver jacket before.
So that's the story I was going to bring up. In the US, that has worked really well, even, parts of Europe. But there have been some cultures from, the people at events representing us that said, hey, this feels awkward. We kind of look like a sideshow. And, that's not the perception that we want either. So if we're not getting just that head turn and curiosity and, oh, cool, I wonder what this is reaction, we're not going to have them show up in the shiny jackets, perhaps in in either Germany or sort of some of the APAC regions. We got some specific feedback that they didn't feel like it was being perceived in the same way. And so, okay, don't do it. Let's do this instead. We're walking that same line with the color pink. We're still, that is a very different color, and that's intentionally chosen because it's not a very common color in our industry. And some of the perception that we're doing with that we're getting from that, none of it's necessarily negative, but it's walking that line. So always listening, always being receptive, and always being empathetic as well, I think, is the key. But not always giving in either.
Yeah, and I remember some internal discussions about the intense discussions about the winky a rabbit icon. There are very strong opinions about that on many sides.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, it's great. I mean, design or brand elicits a lot of personal and emotional responses, and that is the point, which is really cool. I mean, and you just have to be comfortable with everybody having an opinion, because it means that people are trying to own it, and that is nothing but positive.
Yeah, I firmly believe if no one is talking about your brand, you're not doing it right. And of course, I think with the approach we've taken, not everyone is going to love it, and that's fine. We intentionally did that, and it's at the end of the day, we need an identity that is us. And we're obviously not going to be everyone's best friend, but hopefully most people like us and get it, and aren't too scared off.
They seem to. So when you've got this, brand image, you've got the emotion you want to display. The way you do that in visuals is kind of obvious. the way you do that in, say, the website is kind of obvious, documentation is somewhat obvious. How does that impact product development itself? What, if someone's an engineer working on the product and the stuff they're working on doesn't have a visual component to it, is there a brand impact they need to keep in mind if you're working on the back end of either platform or any other system?
Yes, of course.
I was
And
hoping
that
that was
is,
the answer.
and that is because it's about your users and your perception. And one of the main things about your brand is your product and the user experience of your product, and whether that brings you joy, and whether that means that you're able to make updates in the future more quickly to get more value to your customer. So even in constructing and being empathetic, while you're, engineering something, that you're engineering for your current customer, you're engineering for your future customer, so that you're able to be responsive to their feedback, and make things more flexible for the future. And I mean, there's more to it, but I think at the basis, it's always there.
But isn't that part of just good engineering? Give yourself
Yes.
flexibility, make sure the user likes it. And my background is in human-computer interaction originally. Believe it or not, that's what my degree was in. And having flexibility in your code, that's a good thing, regardless of brand, I would think. So
yeah, I mean, we're talking now. I mean, it is about brand, but it is also about good design principles. And I am a firm believer that design is not for designers. Design is for everyone. Some of the best designers are in our company and our engineers. And design is, again, about building things now, building things for the future. And everyone does that.
As a firm believer in good API design, 100% agree.
Indeed.
So let's shift a bit. You said
Sure.
you both have worked as front-end designers in the past, and now you actually have front-end developers in the past, and now you're doing design work.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that experience helped you be better designers? Do you miss doing the actual engineering work of implementing the things you're coming up with?
Yes, in an operational way for design. I mean, it is super helpful when you're really there and sort of understanding the different frameworks, etc. And um, it is an obvious sort of transition in some ways. I mean, in both directions. I think it goes in both directions. They're kind of kissing cousins type of thing, where there's a lot of fluidity between needing to know really good design principles, especially as a front end engineer, and being able to really just have the time. Sometimes the role is just about having the time and focus on a particular piece. On the design side, it is just about having the time to actually think about all of the interactions and collaborate, bring all the stakeholders in to collaborate and make the right decisions. And it's about the communication piece. And when you're in there engineering, sometimes that's not your focus or your role. It doesn't mean that you couldn't do it. It just means that, as projects get so big that you need to be able to specialize and focus. So I think that there's a lot of fluidity there. Do I miss it? Yes. I mean, there is a joy to touching the final thing. Design ideally doesn't come at the end, just where after all the decisions are been made, just make it pretty. That's one part of design, and that's not a design practice we do here. Design comes very early in the process, and sometimes, and then we come at the end as well, and we work closely with the front end engineer to sort of finalize it. But there is joy in being able to craft that and actually hit the sort of deploy button and launch it, and that's not the designer's role at that point.
So, sounds an awful lot like the engineer versus architect split that I often talk about on the
Yeah,
technical side.
maybe it's similar. Savannah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mean, my history is a lot more lightweight in that I'm going to age myself. I spent my days coding Facebook tabs. Do you guys remember Facebook tabs?
I don't Facebook, so I don't know.
No one
neither.
remembers them. No one looked at them. But what it really taught me, it was really difficult for me because I'm an intuitive person, but I love my analytical side of life. But I struggle with development because everything is so literal and so scientific. X plus Y always equals Z, and there's never any arguing about that fact. If something is broken, you can only go in there and remedy in the code to fix that. You can't put a Band-Aid over anything. And so with design, I like that more nomadic lifestyle where you can experiment a little bit more, and sometimes X plus Y can equal N if you create it to do that. But what was really helpful for me is, especially, moving into the tech world. Most of my career has been spent here on the design side, but in more technical places. And it's really allowed me to, have a conversation with developers, have a sense of what it is that they're speaking about. And, it gives me a leg up of just kind of understanding the universe that I'm in.
Two different directions I could go here. Here's one. So some companies, there's two parts to this. One thing I know we've talked about internally, especially with Chris Lockhart, who's, for those who don't know, manages our blog and coordinates the various blog posts that go out, is individual people at the company often have their own voice, their own style, which may or may not be the same as the ideal company brand. How much variation can you allow there? You have some companies that go all in on one point, like, MailChimp, everything is about that monkey. But, for Platform, obviously, when I'm writing a blog post, it feels different than when you're writing a blog post, or when Chad is writing a blog post, or someone else is writing a blog post. So how do you balance having that consistent voice with allowing individual people to have their own sub voice, I suppose, without just becoming oppressive drones, because that doesn't help anybody, and including the brand? How do you balance those things?
I think it's really about where is that voice coming from, and where does it live. One of the things that we have is we call a dynamic brand, and that means that it has layers and levels. So when we are talking about things like blog posts or individual talks, I know you do a lot of this, we celebrate that voice because we celebrate our people. We want them to be themselves. They already are a representation of our brand because they work here for a reason. And I think that's something that we want to encourage. But we also do need to sound like we are coming from the same company at our heart. I think that our brand voice, it gets a lot more strict and stringent as we, move up into more corporate communications. When we're talking about the marketing side in particular, the whole website needs to sound like the same person wrote it. We don't want someone to go to the product page and feel like they're talking to a different person than they spoke to on our agency page. So that's really where the brand guide and our voice foundation comes in to be helpful. And that doesn't mean that the same person has to write everything or the same person has to represent us all the time. But it does need to sound like it's coming from the same personality in those settings. But when it comes to blog posts and things like that, I think we really want people to sound like themselves, as long as they're not too far from.
As long as sounding like themselves doesn't mean sounding like a jerk.
Yeah.
That's what you get.
There you go.
So do you have any concrete examples of what, how you would take, to use the example of the website in writing, what things do you tell people writing for the website to do so that they sound like Platform?
Yeah, so actually this is fascinating, probably to no one but me, but going back to those interviews we did with leadership and those keywords, we kind of did this cross-examination of everything, and we found these repeats that really resonated with people. It was a string of about 5 or 6, maybe 7 words. From those, we developed a personality statement, because we are this humanistic brand and we wanted to give it a life and really figure out who we are. So we kind of took those words and wrapped them into this personality statement, and it really is who we are. So before anyone writes anything, even before I design anything, I like to refresh myself with our personality statement, to just kind of get in the mode of who we actually are. Other than that, I mean, we do have some actual, real rules to follow. Things like we are not elitists. We don't want to sound, we are experts. We don't have to tell people that we're experts. Direction like that, I think, is really helpful to have.
Sounds similar to acting, taking a moment to get into a character before you perform, or to get into a character before you write. Does that sound like a fair analogy?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny, I've never actually thought about that. That is actually my background, is in theater. And I mean, there is something to that, right? Where you're always being empathetic, I think, to your audience or that, particular role. It's about really making sure that you are sort of embodying the key values before you're writing or executing anything.
So changing gears a little bit. At Platform, we have an in-house design team that includes the two of you. In my previous life, before Platform, I was a consultant doing websites for various customers, various clients, and very often the companies we were working with had brought in an outside design team that had done some design work before we even got there. And yeah, that was our common pattern, which meant they had a lot of companies that were working with outside design teams that would come in, design something as a consultant, and then leave. We didn't do that. We decided to build a design team in-house rather than hire one as a consultant, short-term or long-term. Why did we make that decision? What are some of the pros and cons of that? Do you feel we took the right approach there?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I feel really passionate about. Design is a critical piece. Actually, design helped form this company. It wasn't myself, but design is, again, in the real sense, about sparking those conversations. And it's not about a designer there, but it is about going through that design process. And Boyan and Damien were there sort of collaborating and building something, and that sparked the original sort of idea. And that's how we approach design all throughout the company. It is about that spurring collaboration and having making sure that key stakeholders' voices are being heard, and that you're seeing all of the perspectives and you're going through the process. And with an outside consultancy, you're never going to be able to do that. I mean, the design, sometimes they come through and they lead you through that process, but to do it on a day-to-day basis, it would be impossible. You have to have that long-term relationship. And you have to have that power in-house to be able to sort of strengthen it on a day-to-day basis.
I will jump in and say, we kind of cheated though, right?
Right, that's true.
Because when we started our rebrand, we did start with a new team led by Allison. So we had a special circumstance where we were able to bring a new perspective and not have those preconceived notions or old baggage in the way or making any messes. So, there is some wisdom to bringing in outside help at times. But for us, I think we kind of got the best of both worlds there.
By building a new in-house team to do the process.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So Savannah's absolutely right. That was kind of the crux. We actually started scaling design here as we wanted to build the brand, because we wanted to do it intentionally. And that's when we brought on Savannah to lead the brand and communication side, and Nat to lead the product side. And we've continued scaling and building. I think we're 5 now in the design team, and we have the plans to continue to scale that. But Savannah brought in great, the questions that you need to spur the right parts of the brand process, the introspection and the questions, and why are you doing things this way? What does it look like if you do it this way instead? And that is key. And sometimes if you're there for years, it's just difficult to break out of your day-to-day and your assumptions.
Yeah, we talk about that on the documentation side too. Your first 2 weeks of the company are when you're most useful. After that, you've just gotten used to everything that's wrong.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now we're also, are there cases where even with an in-house team like we have, you'd say it's good to bring in an outside team temporarily?
We are today, actually.
Okay, then.
Savannah, do you want to go ahead?
Totally unplanned.
So I think another commonality of a lot of people that have worked here is we all passionately would love an explainer video talking about who we are and what we do and helping us decipher our complex product. It's been on my list since I started, and I'm not alone in that. So
Me
we
too.
Actually, we this week kicked off with an outside agency that we'll be working closely with, and we're so excited.
So why did we go with an outside agency for that part rather than just hiring more in-house people? Was that just a budget question, or was there a conscious decision that an outside team would do this particular task better?
It's both. It's the same thing that we just talked about, I think, about that outside perspective. I mean, when you're doing an explainer video, it is for those people that are encountering your product for the first time, basically, or the second time very early in the process. And I think having that outside perspective is really key. And with such a complex product, honestly, it's just hard. I mean, this is something that we've been trying to get closer and closer to over the years of, what is that elevator pitch of your key features and value, and getting it all wrapped up in a pretty bow in 60 to 90 seconds is super challenging. And it can, spark a lot of internal debate too. And so I think in this case, having an agency be that partner and that shine the mirror a bit in different directions will be really beneficial to us. And yes, we don't have the capabilities right now of supporting an in-house animation team full-time right now. So it makes sense to use outside help in that case.
So kind of related to that then, our design team is, like the rest of the company, fully distributed. At this point, even before the pandemic, most of us are working remotely from wherever we happen to be. What kind of extra challenges does that pose for a design team when you can't put something up on a whiteboard or stick a piece of paper in front of someone and draw marks on it? How does that change your process?
It's hard. I think it kind of provides its own special challenges and opportunities. I mean, you have to be really intentional in hiring, I think, and find people that are, enthusiastic and able to work remotely, because we have to be really active about things like feedback and talking to each other, and being on the same team. We're not 5 people doing individual things. We're 5 people working together, and also in collaboration with marketing. And, something we put a lot of emphasis on, and something we'll always be working on, is our own critique process. And, how do we do that remotely? There's some days where I want to bang my head against the wall because I really just want to get Luis and Allison in the room with me and, just sketch stuff out and get it done, versus having meetings and uploading sketches and doing all of these things. So it's not a cakewalk all the time. I think another challenge was just time zones. when we were hiring Nat, we fell in love with her, and it's hard because she's in Australia, and me and Allison are as far away from her as we could possibly be. So it does affect our lives and when meetings happen, and you have to be, as a remote company, you have to be aware of that and flexible in your own schedule. I think us West Coasters, we have to overlap with France and the EU often, so we start pretty early in our day, which works out great for me and Allison because we're early birds. But I think it is difficult to have a remote team. I mean, especially when you're doing things like celebrations. We can't just go get a happy hour together when there's a big win, or when it's someone's birthday or work anniversary. I know when Corona's done and it's safe to travel again, we really want to have an all design meetup and really kind of get through some projects together. And we haven't all even met in person yet, so it's it makes it hard.
I think there's also, it's not all bad though. I think there's a lot of benefits, because design it can just as easily connect with the other teams as well. So in some ways it becomes a little less insular, because everybody at the company is remote. We're all sort of spread out, and we are just as easily able to work with each other as we are other departments. And so I think in some ways that makes that collaboration, it puts it on equal footing, I guess, in a lot of ways, which is kind of an interesting outcome of that.
So it makes the cross-functional part easier, since
yeah,
you don't need to walk down the
equal.
hall to talk to someone else. You can just drop
yeah,
it to
or
another Slack channel.
the design team isn't like in their little corner, or whatever. We're just as accessible to everyone as everyone else is.
So,
and there's some cool tools actually too. I mean, that really helps. Just workflow and using tools to sort of get on the same page. It really is, some of that design feedback and just human touch, that everybody misses. I think that makes the remote thing a bit challenging. But
what kind of tools are we using for that you found helpful? I know I see Figma links a lot. When you're passing designs around to me.
Figma. It's not perfect, but Figma really is is kind of a game changer for us in the way that we can all be in the same file at the same time working on something. It's not like, oh, I'm going to download, make a change locally, and then load it back up, and then you'll see the new versions, and there's 7 different versions of files, and which one is the current one. Figma, it's all live. Now, unfortunately, that's more on the product side. We don't have the same exact tool set on the brand and communication side. That is still a bit more traditional, using sort of Adobe, etc. Savannah, do you have any thoughts there on tooling?
I mean, we're in Slack all day, and I think one thing I try to bring or encourage is just reminding each other that we're humans. So as personal as we can get or are comfortable with. I mean, we do daily stand-ups on Slack where we, talk about what we did yesterday, what we're doing today, what our blockers are. We also just recently started doing those, as a call to just have that time in the room together. I think it's anything we can do to just share little life updates on occasion and share photos of our workspaces even or what's going on. It's just a fun thing, and it is so worth it too to just have the ability to work remote and interact with different people that you wouldn't normally because they don't live near you.
So I think
that's actually key. Sorry, Larry. That's actually key when you're doing critique sort of all the time or working on that collaboration piece, that you don't forget when you're remote that you're still humans, and building in that time for building the team and the trust between everybody. I mean, I think is absolutely critical. And is part of, the brand experience internally too, that it's an important aspect when you're trying to analyze stuff and giving feedback. And engineering experience is the same thing, just to remember that it's not all about saying you're doing this wrong or this is how, that it is also sort of about the life and the perspectives that everybody is bringing.
Yeah, that's one thing I know that Fred, our CEO, has talked about, that part of the platform culture is we have each other's backs. And that then extends to we have our customers' backs too, because we're used to that pattern of, oh, someone has a problem, I'll help them. And that just bleeds over into the customer interaction. And that's also part of that brand concept of, we want you to be successful, whether you are someone else on the design team or someone from another team or a customer or whoever. So that's
Very
I
well
think that's
said.
a good example of
Indeed.
how that brand becomes intrinsic in everything.
Yeah, well
So
said.
we're running a little bit towards the end here. I understand you had some visuals you want to share at one point. We haven't quite gotten to those. So I have some examples of our brand guidelines that you developed.
Sure, yeah.
I couldn't figure out how to work it into the flow of the conversation, so we'll just go with it.
I probably should have done this when I was talking about this stuff, but it does help give some visuals that kind of ground and link to some of the things we were talking about. So, this page is just some of the quotes that I got, and I think you gave one of these verbatim about our company and how people do perceive it, folded there. So you just make our lives easier. Let me get over to the right page. But yeah, so here's that list of words I kept talking about over and over again of really our identity, and there was a lot of repetition when I talked to people, and hopefully we're holding true to these lists. There's our power statement of really why doesn't everything work like this, and
that's an actual quote from a customer, as I recall, right? Why doesn't everything work like this?
No, I got it from Rob. It probably is from an actual customer, though.
I seem to recall that coming from a customer originally, and we just loved the line so much.
We should credit them. I've taken Gordon Ramsay out. I don't think I have his permission, but if you're listening, I'm sure he watches. Let me know if I can put you in our brand guide. But yeah, here's those research points of just how bold and how corporate or quirky we want to land. And then, yeah, I can kind of stop on this brand personality statement that kind of wraps up, who we strive to be and where we want to maintain.
And so this would be the acting prompt we were talking about before, of getting into character before writing or designing or whatevering.
Okay. I lied. There's two more that might be interesting. We also developed a brand essence, which is for internal use. It's not something we use in our marketing, but the point of this is to distill your company into 2 to 5 word statement, which for us was hard, and there was a lot of heated arguments with note cards at a table in Barcelona. But we got there, and this is something we're proud of and stand behind. And here's our kind of linear rationale of how we got there and what that means.
And so then I assume we want to shrink that first step as much as possible between emotion to revelation.
Well, the longer the first step is, the more they love us, right?
Okay, very cool. So fair warning to any future guests on the podcast, the bar has been set. They brought visuals. They brought visual aids. So you're on notice. So it doesn't look like we have any new questions in chat on YouTube. So before I let you go, I have one last question for you that I think, given that I've been here long enough, the discussion's been around, I'm kind of contractually obligated to ask. Where in the world does the company name come from? And are we ever going to change it?
Okay. Wow, you're saving the hard stuff for last. I guess that's good.
The mic drop.
Indeed. Yeah, our name comes from the need. We needed something really quickly, and we were actually known in our Karma Skies days as Commerce Platform. And that was the name of that original product when it was tied to that company. And we needed a URL, and it made sense to add the .sh in the sort of shell example, and it stuck. And it's really hard to sort of unstick. There's been a lot of debate in our company sort of about our name, and a lot of passion around it, that it's our starting point, and it's, you know, it's great and it's strong. And there's been some on the other side of the coin. We debated as we did this brand process whether to change our name at that point, and it takes a lot of investment, even just human investment and process investment, to change that name. And at the time, we decided, and leadership decided, that it wasn't what we needed to do now. And we'll see. It's never closed, but the more that your brand is known, in some ways, the less the name is important, because your name is your brand. It's really those sort of beginning stages, where, you know, the brand name is a bit more important. So I think it's going to be a constant struggle. It's a heated topic, and we'll see in the end what happens.
For the record, I'm fine with the name. But it's interesting to hear that it came out because, well, we need an adjective, and that's an adjective. There's a placeholder
Yeah, well,
that
it
never went away.
it tied, and we needed a URL, indeed.
Okay, so what's next in the ongoing brand process? More rabbits?
Anna?
Documentation.
Uh-oh,
There we go.
they're coming for
We're
us.
coming for you, indeed.
I think Nat is leading. Oh, sorry, Allison.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is that. It's about the, you know, permeation of the brand everywhere throughout our company, and the things that go deeper and broader, you know, in the customer experience, and we tackle those sort of one thing at a time.
Yeah.
All right.
And specifically, Nat is leading some really exciting stuff, and Louise around our design system in the product itself. So there's going to be some really beautiful and concrete things coming quickly.
I look forward to it. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up for the day? On design, on platform, on brands?
No, thank you so much for all of the questions, Larry, and inviting us along. And happy
Thanks, Larry.
Friday.
Thanks for being here. So hold that thought while I figure out how to turn off the broadcast.
Sounds good. Still here.
Yeah.